everybody. James here with the National Training Fund. Today we're going to be talking to Brian Rigby out of Local 732 about his experience in the grant space, some of the things that he has done, some of the things that he's excited about, some of the roadblocks that he has ran into, as well as some of his best practices and talking about things that he would do differently if he knew then what he knew now. So we're going to have a whole series of these coming out. We hope you find value to them and enjoy the show.
So my name's Brian Rigby. I'm the President and Apprenticeship Training Coordinator for Local 732. So we cover Montana and Idaho.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Thanks for being here, Brian. What we're going to talk about today is kind of some of the things that you have encountered in the grant space. We have a pretty large movement across the country of trying to get people motivated into the grant space. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so the purpose of kind of this grant series and what we're doing here is just to kind of give people some information as far as, what you're doing in the grant space, what you've ran into, some of the, maybe tips and tricks or advice that you can give some of the other apprenticeship coordinators, local union staff and stuff as they're kind of considering moving into the space. So maybe we'll just jump right into it, and we'll start with, the first question that we sent out was, what motivated you as a coordinator to get into the grant space?
So for me, it was everybody around us was landing some grant money. Being an ironworker, we're competitive in nature. So I started flipping through the sheet saying, all right, well, how do we get a grant? And that's really where it was what's available, so then it's starting down that rabbit hole, because the grant realm is definitely, holy smokes, when you see all these different avenues that are out there, all this different money, from the state level. And that's definitely where it was an easier start for myself, was looking at what's available in Idaho and in Montana.
Gotcha.
And that's really where I started looking.
So you kind of mentioned a second ago, there was it sounded like some of the local JATCs maybe in your district council were kind of already, working in the grant space or kind of going that direction. So there was obviously like a peer pressure then to kind of get into that space.
Well, and I don't know if it was peer pressure, if it was, hey, we're going to spend this money. You're already spending it, so let's find another source. Let's find some more resources out here. And, if you're not doing everything you can in these capacities, it's all right, we'll pass you up and find somebody else that can do it. So it's no different than being in the field working, right? You want the best guy to be out there in your raising gang or hooking on, or under the hood. So in this capacity, it's saying, all right, well, I've got to be the best I can be. Let's find some other sources of income.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and that kind of harkens back to what we talk about a lot about, that fiduciary responsibility in these positions and making sure that you're utilizing the contributions the best you can. And I know you and I have talked a lot about it in the past of, well, what better way to use, the contributions, the apprenticeship contributions, than not use them at all and use exterior sources of funding to get some of that work done.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, the apprenticeship, I feel like we're just out there shaking a coffee can, living off the land, really. We'll beg, borrow, plead for anything to continue to get forward progression in our apprenticeship program, and we don't have enough money, or we don't have the newest equipment. So it's our responsibility to say, all right, how can we have that for our apprentices, for our members? We want to offer the latest and greatest, but, when you have a 76-cent contribution per member per hour, takes a lot to build that nest egg up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And things aren't getting cheaper. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that's good. So the motivation we kind of talked about and kind of what pushed you into that space. Maybe we'll move on to the next question and talking about kind of once you got into that space, and maybe, and feel free to kind of add some of the grants that you've gotten, talking about them kind of specifically maybe, but in an overall capacity, how did these grants help your program, your membership, and your apprentices? And then give us a couple examples of those grants themselves.
So obviously being able to bring in more hands-on stuff in the apprenticeship, that was the goal, right? Oh, we've got to get some stuff for these guys to get them out of the classroom into the shop and have something to work on. So the first avenue I went to was our local steel erectors association, and beating on their door, hey, let's see what can we do. I need you guys to help me out here. So they were the first ones that said, all right, we'll open up the checkbook and let us know what you're looking for, write a formal submission, get some price quotes, and we'll help you out. So it's like, all right, here we go, we got some money coming in, and the first stuff was our apprentices journeying out, getting some jackets for them. So here's this easy win. Write up a slip what we're looking for. Here's the cost of them. My apprentices are now getting some jackets when they journey out. And that got the ball rolling to saying, hey, well, I started reading our contract and it says when we want to start promoting and updating our facility for journeyman upgrades. So we started looking at what they would allow us to do, and all right, got some more green lights. So as we picked up some welding equipment, and then we had actually landed the structural mock-up for the double ICB, and the Steel Erectors Association picked up the rigging kits. And I'm like, all right, now we're getting into some real cash here. We're hitting that $10,000 mark. And then that's when I started flipping over stones, looking, all right, now let's really get some big money coming in, and landed one with the state of Montana that they were going to give us $45,000 to promote and recruit apprentices. Well, we already need new apprentices. I mean, that's happening on the annual, that's our cycle, is bringing in new apprentices. These guys are going to give us money for it. And they didn't even ask about retention. So, all right, here we go. We need to increase by 30%. Well, perfect. We're going to journey out 25%. So I hope that we can bring in at least another 30% and get them into the first year into the classroom. So as we kick that through the goalpost, got it, landed that grant money. That was another good win.
You pointed something out there that is really important. You talked about a lot of these grants and these structures are to get people into registered apprenticeship programs, and they wanted to see kind of this increase or intake, of kind of a 30%. And you talked about how you already knew that 25% were going to be leaving, the apprenticeship. So that was an easy fill because you need the people anyway. And then just to show, a slight increase or overall in intake, whatever, that it's almost like people don't consider that. They think to themselves, oh, well, I got to take this many apprentices in. But in reality, you're taking those apprentices in anyway, because you're trying to fill that void of what's leaving your program, leaving your workforce, right? And so I think that was a good point. So.
Yeah, no, and I think on that kind of opened the floodgates on the contractor, seeing how aggressive we were to recruit and bring in more new apprentices, to where that thing snowballed on us. And now our apprenticeships increased by 90% in the last 3 years. And we're
Wow.
like, holy smokes, we're not built for an increase that big, that fast. So now we've got so many different moving parts and pieces that we're trying to juggle, which kind of led me into another grant in Idaho that I'm still in the midst of. And the state of Idaho has a grant, once you're approved through the Idaho Workers Outreach Network, that they're going to pay my apprentices $8,000 to finish the apprenticeship, start to finish, so that the apprentice actually doesn't get the check. The apprenticeship would get it, but doled out to each apprentice through the 3-year program. They're going to work boots, tools, books, anything associated with being an apprentice ironworker, they get to utilize those funds on. So if we can land that one, that'll be huge, and that's that's going to be a big win for those apprentices, especially while they're in class. We do block training, so they're already missing time at work. Whether they're collecting unemployment or they're good at saving, which farm few apprentices have that ability to be that financially responsible. But so that'll be another really big win if we can get that one through the goalpost.
Nice. Awesome. So another thing, and that kind of moves us into, all of the different steps that you've taken to kind of move through the grant space, start procuring grants, building those relationships with, like you said, your state to kind of turn, and turn these stones over to find these spaces for money. I like how you talked about some of the grants that you got kind of opened up other problems. Like, you started intaking so many apprentices, like how do we kind of handle this thing and moving into different spaces there. So that kind of leads us to the third question, which what were some of the hurdles or roadblocks you ran into kind of in the beginning? Maybe things like your membership not being really receptive to grant funding, or some resistance somewhere, or just gathering all the information, or what were some of the stuff that you ran into in the beginning that was kind of a difficult thing?
I think the biggest hurdle was managing the spending. I can spend money all day, every day. That's easy. But to make sure that what we're spending and how it relates to what is applicable to that grant, and then how I'm tracking that, because then you've got to submit on that every quarter to whoever's doling you out that check. So that was a bit of a learning curve to, the formatting, and I talked with some folks and they were like, oh man, they should be supplying you with a means that you're going to follow, like a template on that billing. And that didn't happen, and I'm not sure if the state had that many moving parts and pieces and they didn't really have that template that they were following, or if they were shooting from the hip or what. But that kind of hit. So that was definitely a learning curve. And then kind of given me the ability now to look into the future, to forecast, all right, here's what we need to be looking at to be prepared. You almost need somebody to manage that specific grant. So the amount of time that it actually took to say, holy smokes, I didn't plan to be able to focus that much time in on the reporting aspect of it. So that was a huge learning curve. So those are things that I, would have liked someone to say, hey, make sure, when you're applying for this grant, that you've got money in there, because the grant would almost pay for, if you have that outlook to be able to utilize that to manage the grant.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, there's a lot of things that, we kind of don't see when we get into this space. I see a lot of individuals across the country just kind of jumping into the grant space because they think, oh, free money, and so I think it's important to kind of show some of those things that maybe we might not really be prepared for or understand, like that reporting aspect. And, how do we do that? And what documents do we use to do that? And what's the contract say? And, how many hours is it going to take an individual to process this stuff and submit the stuff and track it? And so I'm glad you pointed that out, because being aware of that is, a big thing. And a lot of grants, you can write administrative cost into them that will help you cover that stuff too. So, that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just making sure, because that's got to be on that grant application, right? So when you jump into that thing and you didn't plan for it, you're like, holy smokes, well now I just spent 15 grand in labor
Right. Yeah.
for a
Exactly.
$20,000 grant.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So just kind of moving through. I want to try to keep the video like under 10 minutes total. So I think by the time we kind of edit some of this stuff out, we'll be looking good. But what are your plans, or what is your local union and your apprenticeship? What are your plans in the grant space moving forward? Is anything on the horizon, or things that you would like to do?
So we actually had the governor, Greg Gianforte, come in, and he had talked about a lot of opportunities that we're going to see in Montana coming forward, to be able to help promote and expand registered apprenticeship here in Montana. Talking in Idaho, it seems like they've always got something kindling, but they like to change the rules on me. So, we're gonna just keep watching it. I've got a couple different avenues that I look at and utilize for what grants are popping up, what's becoming available, and those kind of vary state to state. So they're not. I don't have the same resource to be able to utilize for Idaho as I do in Montana. But jumping in there and seeing what's available and what was going to apply to us. So that's definitely something we just keep on the horizon. We're constantly checking back in and being like, hey, this looks like something we can utilize. Let's do a little digging and get an application and see what turns of it.
Nice. Now I know a lot. What we hear a lot, or what I suspect is some of the replies are going to be is, oh well, we're kind of a right to work state, or we're a little bit more right leaning, and so we really don't have the support of registered apprenticeship and unions, and so there's really not a lot of available, to me. I know some of your Idaho and kind of Montana areas kind of fall under that category. Has there been any roadblocks there, or things that you've been able to do to kind of overcome that type of atmosphere and kind of be successful in the grant space?
So nothing that really landed me real success yet. There's a lot of good conversation that's taken place with it, and that's exposing people to what we do because we're already a self-funded program. And I think that pushing that across everybody's agenda and saying, hey, we're already paying for this thing ourselves. We're no different than a college who seems to just have grant money flooding in their door. I think it's just getting them exposed to what it is that we do and them seeing our vision, because it's going to align. It doesn't matter if you're on the left side, you're on the right side. Everybody's looking at that goal, and it's going to be pretty similar. So I think that through promoting your program, and having those conversations with those people on those committees are what's going to get you through those roadblocks.
Nice. Yeah, good perspective. Perfect. Okay. If you could do something differently, based kind of on what you know now, if you could go back to the start line and retain the knowledge that you have, what do you think that would be? Do you have any little tips or gems, for people watching?
I would say that's going to be the reporting aspect. That's one that I look back at now and it's like, man, all right, what is it going to entail? What are they looking for as far as reporting back in to continue to keep this income coming in? That'd be my biggest one, is that the reporting of it is such a crucial piece to that puzzle, and being successful to not get overwhelmed, because that's the other thing is you get in and you get snowballed. You're like, I don't want to do that again. This was horrible. This is a horrible experience. And it shouldn't be like that. So as long as you've got those expectations going into it, that hey, there's going to be some in-depth reporting that's going to go along with this, you're going to be able to be successful and keep moving forward.
Gotcha. Great. Good perspective. Yeah. And that comes down to kind of like understanding the structure of the grant and how the contract is laid out. And, having some of that information prior to applying for the grant is key. And I think that's one of the things that maybe this series of webinars that we're doing with apprenticeship coordinators who have been successful in this space is going to help some of those watching, oh, I would have never even thought about that, so I think that's definitely key. So overall, before we kind of get into the last question of final thoughts, but I remember when I kind of got into the grant space as an apprenticeship coordinator, and kind of going down the line, I only had one regret, and the one regret is that we weren't aware about grant funding and how to utilize it earlier, because I think back to how much more we could have done if, say, we were, in starting to get into the grant space, maybe 5 years prior to what we did. And, so what are kind of your thoughts around that? Are you guys glad you've gone down the grant space? Do you kind of carry that same sentiment about like, man, I wish we'd have been doing this a long time ago?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even, to kind of circle back on what you'd said about the hurdles of being in right to work states and far right leaning states, was I looked at a couple other avenues of successful people who had operations that landed a grant that I thought would work into our program. And I gave them a call and partnered up with them. We didn't benefit with the actual grant funding, but now we got people out doing the legworks. They're doing all the reporting, and they're doing it because they landed a grant. So these folks are basically our unofficial organizers out there bringing in recruits. They're doing pre-screening. It's like, hey, you guys landed this grant to get in there and help out underrepresented folks in the community, and we're going to benefit from it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So two takeaways there: utilizing your community-based organizations to do a lot of this work for you, right? And that's saving you from having to do that, but also being aware enough to be looking at what community-based organizations are in your area, what grant funding they have received, and how you can partner with them and get them to do a lot of this legwork for you. I'm really glad you brought that up. Good call.
Well, yeah, and that was a big win that we just kind of started on with last week officially, and all of a sudden now we're getting stuff donated to us because we're helping promote our apprenticeship. Well, we're already doing that.
Right.
And we've got the folks coming in, and the great thing is the Department of Labor was there last week. We had a big event, and they were like, "Oh, holy smokes! It's these ironworkers. They're back." They just keep popping up.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. Yeah, well, like an old boy told me one time, if you ain't at the table, you're on the table. So you got to be in the room having the conversations, otherwise it's never going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's it. And there's definitely a lot of different angles to look in at this. So if you don't want to apply for the grant, all right, well, who else is, and jump on their coattails because they got to spend the money. So you could be that out for them without the responsibility, or jump in there and land one.
Yeah,
Do the
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and that's a good. I like that you brought that up too, because a lot of times if you're kind of skeptical or hesitant to get into the grant space full boat, meaning like going and applying or capturing grant funding yourself, a lot of times just being aware of what's happening in your state, who's getting money, you can find a partner that you can partner with on a grant that maybe you're not even contractually obligated to, but just kind of part of the work, and you can benefit from some of that money. So. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, all right. Well, as we kind of move into the last question here and wrap this quick conversation up, Brian, any final thoughts or things that you can think of for the people that are watching?
I think I would just say, don't sit and wait for one to land. Jump out there and start turning over those stones, because that money's out there. Whether it's federal money or it's state money, it's out there. They want us to promote and grow our apprenticeships. So get out there and find it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all watching this series of the Grant Funding 101. Brian makes a lot of great points about his program, some of the things that he benefited from, some of the roadblocks that he ran into. If you are considering stepping into the grant space and you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. My email and contact will be in the description of the video below. And go get that money, because if we don't use it, our competition is. And there is a ton of money out there to expand and market our great programs and help us do the great work that we're already doing across the country. So appreciate y'all. Have a great day.